Hey, what's going on, guys? So I was saying to my friend I just met, we were talking about the stock market and what's been going on with it lately. The craziest time ever, I think, ever in the stock market. One of them, at least. Historic time. And how exciting that is, and how it's sort of like a reckoning, and how exciting that is, really, because since they got so lazy and started slipping up, we were able to actually use our power in a concerted effort, just like they do, to actually defeat them at their own game. Now they're talking about how they're worried that this is just the beginning. It could just keep going on and on and on. So they're going to have to figure out another way to do business, which could really change the economy for the better, change the world for the better. The funny thing about it is, maybe the people who are losing all this money, maybe it could be the greatest thing that's ever happened to them, because there's a reason that they're these people who are actually profiting off of the collusion between the media and their own betting against a company to bring them down. It's just basically they fell into their own pit, and then they were lazy enough to let the information out, and they didn't expect anybody to utilize their will, and then they shorted multiple stocks to very high degrees, basically blatantly almost trying to provoke this to happen. And these are stocks that are suffering because of the pandemic, which they helped engineer. So yeah, people have been talking about it all day. It's like three slaps in the face, They engineer the economic collapse in 2008. They get bailed out. They engineer COVID. And they still end up doing very well, and then they get bailed out again after they disenfranchise everybody, taking away their jobs in COVID. They bail out the bankers again by having Robinhood freeze the trading of the next stocks that were about to go crazy, just like GME, that were about to get short squeezed. And so they basically used market manipulation and essentially bailed out the hedge funds in that way. So it's always the little guy getting shafted, but not so much anymore. It's come to the point where freedom of speech and access to technology, it's getting to the point where there's no other option than a nonviolent financial revolution, the Fintech revolution. And I think it's a sign from God, a blessing from God too, that could really benefit me in my life. Really promoting AMC and trying to get that one to really be the next one, because everybody's already talking about it, and this is why GME already went parabolic and viral, because it became a thing, and because people had a concentrated effort. Somebody used the analogy from Finding Nemo, like when the fish was telling all the other fish in the net to swim down, and they started swimming down, they were able to pull the net down. He used that as an analogy. I thought that was a great analogy. And so the reason I'm jumping in on this and willing to put a little bit of risk, relatively small amount of risk, is because I see a nice opportunity, and so do a lot of other people, and they see this trend, and they see the shorting on each of these companies, this percent of short sales being short, of shares being shorted, and so we basically just counter them at their own game, and it's phenomenal. It's really wonderful that this is happening, and people just have to be careful, and it's a great way to get people more geared towards trying to be more financially free and stable. And again, the free flow of information, which cannot be stopped. They cannot censor and shut down the world. They're going to have to literally shut down America and bring in the Great Tribulation and the Mark of the Beast and the One World Order, and the rapture will happen, and all the saved Christians who believe in the blood of Jesus and death, burial, and resurrection, who stood on Romans through Titus, who stood on that doctrine that Paul preaches about what Jesus did being enough and nothing that we do. It's not the keeping of the law that saves us, even though the keeping of the law is good. You know, maybe a holy thing to do, you know, but it doesn't save us. We're saved by grace through faith in the blood of Jesus and his death, burial, and resurrection. So, you know, I mean, it's just a wonderful thing. I get mixed up sometimes with my train of thought, you know. I mean, it's just whenever I focus on Jesus, that sort of like clouds the whole picture in a good way, you know, because that's ultimately the focus. So, you know, basically, this whole thing is just a major blessing, I think, a sign from God, and the fact of the matter is, no, they don't want to begin a great civil war or revolution. They're not ready to bring in the UN and try to disarm all American citizens. Like, it's not quite going to happen quite yet. Like there's still some time before the rapture comes and the Great Tribulation begins, but every sign for it is all here. So this is why people need to wake up and use these opportunities to fight back in these ways that we can with our money, use our dollar to speak, and have more of it to speak with, you know, because what they're doing is they know that that money does provide them with a lot of power, and by taking it away from us, they will able to take away our power, and they were able to convince people to give up their livelihood over fear of a virus, and getting them to be convinced not to be afraid of losing all their money and going into financial hardship, which isn't the end of the world. I've been through it throughout my life. I think that's an important lesson, to learn to appreciate what you do have. That's what I was saying. It could be one of the best things that's ever happened to these hedge funds people, because they're so spoiled and rich. That's why they let this thing happen in the first place, because they got so soft and spoiled and lazy that they just gave everybody their strategy, and they expected that the internet and everybody that they just disenfranchised over COVID and through the 2008 collapse and all these other crooked schemes they've been doing throughout all these years, they expected that we wouldn't fight back in a peaceful way with our dollar, where we can sit behind a screen and use our Fintech apps, like Cash App or Fidelity or whatever, to invest, you know. Like, they set it up for basically the easiest revolution ever, you know, like a hilarious revolution that's actually very harmless. Basically, it's like, oh, we made people who are already exorbitantly rich, who've made tons of money off of profiting off of the disenfranchisement of the poor. We made them less super rich, which is still incredibly rich and way richer than any of us probably ever will be still. You know, it's like, yeah, it's funny because they have so many assets that they'll never truly go bankrupt. You know, they can always just sell another mansion or two, or you know, they'll figure their stuff out, or maybe they'll become homeless and they'll have to come to terms with the fact that God has